They say stubbornness is a fire that burns its own home before it warms the hands. In one forgotten village, a child once walked boldly into a forest. No man dared enter, and what followed left the earth itself trembling. Some say the beast did not haunt him. It was summoned by his pride. Stay with us and tell me, have you ever ignored a warning? You should have feared. In the heart of a wide and sun-warmed land, where the red earth carried the footprints of generations, there lay a village called Kandara. It was a place where the mornings began with the crowing of roosters and the rhythmic pounding of grain, and where the evenings ended with stories whispered beneath the glow of the fire. The people of Kandara lived close to the land and closer to their traditions. They listened to the elders, respected the spirits, and feared the forest that stood like a silent guardian at the edge of their world. But not every child in Kandara listened. There was a boy named Dalani. Dalani was known throughout the village, not for kindness, nor for wisdom, but for something far more dangerous. He was known for his stubbornness. Dalani, do not climb that tree. The branches are weak, his mother Amara would warn. Yet Dalani would climb higher. Dalani, do not wander near the forest, his father Kofi would say with a firm voice. Yet Dalani would walk closer. And when the other children played by the river, laughing and splashing in the safety of shallow waters, Dalani would stand apart, his arms folded, his eyes fixed on the dark line of trees in the distance. I am not like you, he would say with quiet pride. I am not afraid of stories. The other children would exchange nervous glances. Those are not just stories, whispered a girl named Sade. My grandmother says the forest listens. Dalani scoffed. Then let it listen. I have nothing to fear. But in Kandara, the forest was not spoken of lightly. It was called the Breathing Grove, a place where shadows moved even when the wind was still, and where no hunter dared go beyond the first line of ancient trees. The elders said that something lived deep within it, something older than memory, something that watched and waited. At the center of the village, beneath a great baobab tree, the elders would gather. Their voices were slow and heavy, with meaning like drums that echoed through the soul. One evening, as the sky burned orange, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke, the oldest among them, Elder Bako, spoke to the children. Listen well, he said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. There are paths in this world that are not meant for careless feet. The forest beyond our fields is not yours to challenge. It belongs to forces that do not forgive arrogance. The children sat in silence, their eyes wide, but Dalani leaned back, unimpressed, picking at the dust with a stick. Elder Bako's gaze fell upon him. You child, he said slowly, do you hear my words? Dalani looked up, meeting the elder's eyes without fear. I hear them, he replied, but I do not believe them. A murmur rippled through the gathering. Amara's heart tightened. Dalani. She whispered, her voice trembling with worry. But Dalani only shrugged. How can a forest harm me, he said. Trees do not walk. Shadows do not bite. These are tales for children who are too afraid to see the truth. Kofi's face darkened. You speak with too much pride for one so young. Dalani stood dusting his hands. And you all live with too much fear. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than any storm. That night, as the village slept and the moon cast long silver shadows across the earth, Dalani lay awake. His eyes were not on the stars. They were fixed on the forest. And in his heart, something dangerous had begun to grow, not fear, not doubt, but a burning desire to prove that everyone else was wrong. He did not know that the forest was already listening. They say when a child refuses to hear wisdom, the world itself will begin to speak louder. The next morning, Kandara stirred under a restless sky. A strange stillness clung to the air, as though even the wind held its breath. Women moved through the compound grinding grain, men prepared their tools for the fields, and children gathered again beneath the great baobab tree. But this time the elders did not smile. Elder Bako sat at the center, his back straight, despite the weight of his years. Around him, the other elders formed a quiet circle, their faces serious, their eyes heavy with unspoken concern. Today, Bako began. We do not tell stories for amusement. We speak because something must be understood before it is too late. The children leaned in. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. Dalani stood at the edge of the gathering arms, crossed, his expression unreadable. Bako lifted his hand and pointed toward the distant forest. You see those trees and think they are like any other. But long before your fathers were born, that forest was given a guardian, a being not made of flesh alone but of spirit and judgment. A hush fell over the group. It is called Nkoro, Bako continued. Not a beast that hunts for hunger, but one that hunts for truth. Sade gasped softly. What does that mean? Bako's voice lowered. Nkoro does not chase the innocent. It does not follow those who walk with respect, but those who carry pride, those who mock wisdom, those who believe they are greater than the balance of the world. Those are the ones it calls to. A boy whispered, calls to them. Yes, Bako said, it waits. And when the time is right, it draws them in, not with force, but with their own arrogance. Dalani let out a quiet laugh. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. So this Nkoro, he said, stepping forward, is afraid of humble people, but haunts the proud. That sounds like a story made to scare those who think too much. Gasps rose from the children. Amara, who had come to watch from a distance, pressed her hand to her chest. Dalani, stop this. But Dalani did not stop. He walked closer to the elders, his chin raised. If this creature is so powerful, why has no one seen it clearly? Why does it hide behind whispers and warnings? Kofi stepped forward, his voice sharp. Enough, you will not speak to the elders with such disrespect. Dalani turned to his father. I only ask what no one else dares to ask. Bako studied him carefully. There was no anger in his eyes, only something far more troubling. Pity. Child Bako said softly, you think courage is the absence of fear. But true courage is knowing when to listen. Dalani shook his head. No. True courage is walking where others are too afraid to go. A murmur of unease spread through the gathering. Bako sighed. Then hear this, Dalani. Nkoro does not reveal itself to those who doubt it. It reveals itself to those who challenge it. Dalani smiled faintly. Good. Then perhaps it has been waiting for someone like me. Amara rushed forward, her voice breaking. You speak as though this is a game. This is not a story you can walk away from. Dalani's expression softened for only a moment, but pride quickly hardened it again. I am not afraid, mother. That is what frightens me, she whispered. The wind stirred, then sudden and cold, rustling the leaves of the baobab tree. For a brief moment, every person present felt it, a chill that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the air. Bako closed his eyes. It has heard, he said quietly. Dalani frowned. What has? But Bako did not answer. The gathering broke apart slowly, Onis hanging over Kandara like a shadow. Children whispered among themselves, glancing nervously toward the forest. Even the adults moved with a new caution. But Dalani walked away alone. That evening, he sat at the edge of the village, watching the forest as the sun sank low. The trees seemed darker now, their silence heavier. Yet instead of fear, Dalani felt something else. A pull. They think I will run, he muttered. They think I will hide like the rest. His hands clenched. I will show them the truth. And as night began to fall, Dalani made a decision that would not only change his life, but would awaken something the village had long prayed would never stir again. They say the path to trouble is often walked in silence, when the world is still asleep and no one is there to call your name back. Before the first rooster crowed, before even the sky had begun to pale, Dalani rose from his mat. The compound was quiet. His mother's breathing was soft and steady. His father lay still, one arm resting across his chest. The fire in the cooking place had died into faint embers, glowing like tired eyes in the darkness. Dalani moved carefully. He did not take a lantern. He did not take food. Only a small knife tucked into his waist, not for fear, but for pride, as though he needed something to prove his strength. At the doorway, he paused. For a brief moment, something stirred inside him. A whisper of doubt. A memory of his mother's trembling voice. A shadow of Elder Bako's warning. But Dalani pushed it aside. "I will return before they even know I am gone," he told himself. And then he stepped out into the night. The air was cool, and the earth beneath his feet still held the memory of yesterday's heat. The village behind him lay wrapped in sleep, unaware that one of its own had chosen to walk into danger with open eyes. Ahead of him the forest stood, the breathing grove. Even in the dim light, it seemed different from the rest of the land. The trees were taller, their branches tangled like fingers clasped in warning. The shadows between them were thick, swallowing what little light dared to enter. Dalani approached without hesitation. "This is what they fear," he muttered. Trees and darkness. He stepped past the first line of trunks. Nothing happened, no roar, no movement, no sign of any beast. Dalani smirked. "Just as I thought." He walked deeper. At first, the forest felt ordinary. Leaves crunched beneath his feet. A distant bird called out. The wind moved gently through the branches. But the further he went, the more the world began to change. The air grew heavier. The sounds began to fade. The light, already weak, seemed to dim further, as though the trees themselves were swallowing it. Dalani slowed his steps. "This is nothing," he whispered, though his voice did not sound as strong as before. He noticed the ground beneath him, no longer scattered with fresh leaves, but marked with strange patterns. Indentations too large for any animal he knew. Claw-like shapes pressed deep into the earth. He crouched, touching one, still fresh. Dalani's hand trembled slightly. "It must be from something else," he said quickly. "Something normal." But even as he spoke, the silence pressed closer. No birds, no insects, no wind, only stillness. And then a sound, soft, low. Not a growl, not quite a breath, but something in between. Dalani froze. His heart began to pound against his ribs. "Who's there?" He called out, his voice sharper than he intended. No answer. He turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing. Yet the feeling would not leave him. The feeling of being watched. Dalani straightened, forcing his shoulders back. "Show yourself!" he shouted. "I came here to see the truth." The forest did not respond, but something shifted. A shadow moved, not cast by any light, but moving on its own, slipping between the trees like a living thing. Dalani's breath caught. For the first time since he had stepped into the forest, fear touched him, not fully, not enough to turn him back, but enough to make his pulse race. Still he stood his ground. "I am not afraid," he said, again louder this time, as if saying it would make it true. The shadow stopped, and from somewhere deeper within the forest, something answered. A sound that did not belong to any creature Dalani had ever known. Low, ancient, and aware. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble ever so slightly. Dalani swallowed his grip, tightening around the handle of his knife. This was no longer a story. This was no longer something he could laugh at. And yet, even now, even with fear creeping into his bones, Dalani did not run, because pride, once it takes root, does not release its hold easily, and so he waited, unaware that he had already stepped far beyond the point of turning back. They say when a man calls into the unknown with pride, he should be ready for an answer he does not understand. Dalani stood still, his chest rising and falling as the forest closed in around him. The silence was no longer empty, it was heavy, listening, alive in a way that made his skin tighten. Then from between the ancient trees it emerged. At first, Dalani saw only movement, shadows, bending where there was no wind, darkness folding into a shape too large, to belong to any ordinary creature. Then came the sound, a slow, deliberate step, followed by another, each one pressing into the earth, with a weight that seemed to echo beneath his feet. And then he saw it, Nkoro. It was neither fully beast nor fully spirit. Its body was massive, covered in dark, textured skin that seemed to shift like smoke under moonlight. Its eyes burned not with fire, but with a deep knowing glow, as if they held memories older than the forest itself. Its limbs were long and powerful, ending in claws that glinted faintly, not with blood, but with something colder, something timeless. Dalani's breath caught. Every instinct within him screamed to run, but he did not move. Nkoro stopped a few steps away, its towering form casting a shadow that swallowed Dalani whole. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then a voice filled the space, not from the creature's mouth, but from everywhere at once. From the trees, the ground, the air itself. "You have come far, for one who was warned." Dalani's throat tightened. Still he forced his voice to steady. "I came because I do not believe in fear," he said. "And I do not believe in stories meant to control people." Nkoro's glowing eyes fixed on him. "Is that what you think this is?" Dalani lifted his chin. "Yes." A low sound followed, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. "You speak loudly for one whose heart beats so fast," Nkoro said. Dalani clenched his fists. "I am not afraid of you." Nkoro took a step closer. The ground seemed to sink slightly beneath its weight. "Fear is not your greatest weakness, child," the voice echoed. "Pride is." Dalani shook his head. "Pride is strength. It is what makes me different from those who hide behind old tales." Nkoro's chaza did not waver. "Difference is not always strength," it replied. "Sometimes it is blindness." Dalani's jaw tightened. "If you are so powerful, then prove it. Why hide in shadows? Why wait for people to come to you?" The forest stirred. Nkoro lowered its head slightly, bringing its glowing eyes level with Dalani's. "I do not hunt those who respect the balance," it said. "I do not chase the humble. I do not harm the wise." Its voice grew deeper. "But those who come with arrogance, those who believe they stand above what they do not understand, they do not need to be haunted." Dalani's breath hitched. "They come on their own." A silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Then Nkoro spoke again. "You still have a choice," it said. "Turn back now. Leave this place. Carry this moment as a lesson, and you may walk free." For a brief moment, something flickered in Dalani's eyes. Doubt, fear, the smallest crack in his pride. But it passed. He straightened. "I did not come all this way to run away," he said. "If you are meant to teach me something, then do it. Otherwise, you are nothing more than another story." The forest seemed to exhale. Nkoro closed its eyes slowly. "So be it." When they opened again, the glow had changed. Not brighter, colder. The ground beneath Dalani shifted. The trees around him seemed to move, not physically but in a way that made the world feel unsteady, as though reality itself was bending. Dalani stumbled slightly, his confidence faltering. What are you doing?" he demanded. Nkoro's voice echoed one final time. "I do not punish," it said. "I reveal." The air tightened. The shadows deepened. And in that moment, Dalani realized something far more terrifying than any beast before him. He was no longer in control. They say when pride blinds the eyes, the consequences do not arrive with noise, they arrive with silence that slowly devours everything. The forest did not roar. It did not strike. Instead, it changed Dalani. At first, he thought nothing had happened. He stood where he was breathing hard, his eyes darting around as the shadows settled back into place. The ground beneath him stopped trembling. The trees returned to stillness. Nkoro was gone as if it had never been there. Dalani blinked confused. "Is that all?" he said aloud, forcing a laugh. "You show yourself, speak in riddles, and then disappear." No answer came. Relief washed over him, sharp and sudden. "I knew it," he muttered. "Just another trick to scare the weak." He turned and began to walk back the way he had come. But after a few steps, something felt wrong. The forest looked different. The path he had taken was no longer clear. The trees seemed unfamiliar, their shapes twisted in ways he did not remember. He turned again, scanning for any sign of the way out. Nothing. Dalani's chest tightened. "No. I walked straight," he said. "I remember." He tried another direction. The same trees, the same silence, the same feeling like the forest was watching, waiting. "Enough of this," he shouted. "Show yourself again," but Nkoro did not return. Instead, something else began. Dalani opened his mouth to call out again. And no sound came. He froze. His throat moved. His chest pushed air upward, but his voice was gone. Panic surged through him. "No, no, no," he tried to say, but only silence answered. His hands flew to his throat. Nothing hurt. Nothing blocked him. Yet his voice had vanished, as if it had been taken from him. The truth struck him slowly. Not punishment. Revelation. Dalani stumbled backward, his earlier confidence crumbling. For the first time, fear took full hold of him, not the kind he could laugh away, not the kind he could deny. This was real. And he was alone. Back in Kandara, the morning passed like any other until it didn't. Amara noticed first. She stood at the cooking place, stirring a pot, when she realized something was missing. A presence. A sound. "Dalani," she called. No answer. She checked his sleeping mat empty. Her heart skipped. "Kofi," she said, her voice tightening. "Have you seen him?" Kofi looked up, frowning. "He was here last night." They searched the compound, then the neighbors' homes, then the edge of the village. But Dalani was nowhere to be found. By midday, word had spread. A crowd gathered beneath the baobab tree, voices rising with worry and fear. "He's just a boy," someone said. "He must have wandered too far," another offered. But Elder Bako said nothing. He simply stared toward the forest. Amara approached him, her eyes wet with tears. "Please, tell me where my son is." Bako's face was heavy with sorrow. "He has gone where he believed he needed to go," he said quietly. Amara shook her head. No, he would not. But even as she spoke, she knew. Her knees weakened. "The forest," she whispered. A ripple of fear spread through the villagers. Kofi clenched his fists. "We will go after him." No one of the elders said sharply, "You know what lies beyond those trees." "He is my son," Kofi roared. "And he is not the first to ignore the warnings," Bako replied, his voice steady but filled with pain. Silence fell. Then, as if the forest itself wished to make its presence known, a strange wind swept through the village. Dust rose into the air. The leaves of the baobab tree shivered violently. And from the fields beyond, a cry echoed. The crops, once green and full, had begun to wither. Goats refused to eat. Water in the clay pots turned murky overnight. Fear settled over Kandara like a dark cloud. "It has begun," Bako said softly. Amara covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should have stopped him." Kofi placed a trembling hand on her shoulder, but his own eyes were filled with guilt. "No," he said. "This is what happens when a child believes he knows more than the world." And deep within the forest, unable to speak, unable to find his way, Dalani finally understood. The price of his pride had only just begun to unfold. They say the hardest journey is not the one through the forest, but the one that leads a stubborn heart back to humility. Deep within the breathing grove, Dalani wandered without voice, without direction, and without the pride that once guided his steps. Time no longer felt real. Day and night, blurred together beneath the thick canopy. Hunger gnawed at him. Thirst burned his throat. But worse than all of it was the silence within him. He tried to shout. He tried to cry. He tried to call for his mother, for his father, for anyone, but nothing came, only emptiness. At first, anger had filled him. He had kicked at the trees, thrown stones into the darkness cursed the unseen force that had taken his voice. But anger could not feed him. It could not guide him. And slowly, painfully, it began to fade. In its place came something heavier. Regret. Dalani sank to his knees beside a twisted tree, his body weak, his eyes hollow. He pressed his hands into the earth, his shoulders shaking, not with sound, but with silent sobs. I was wrong, his heart cried, though no words escaped his lips. Images filled his mind, his mother's worried eyes, his father's stern voice, Elder Bako's calm warning. He had laughed at them all. Now their words echoed louder than anything. Dalani lowered his head to the ground. For the first time in his life, he did not try to prove anything. He did not try to resist. He simply accepted. The forest seemed to notice. A wind stirred soft, almost gentle. The shadows shifted, and then Nkoro returned. It did not emerge with force this time. It appeared as though it had always been there, its massive form blending with the darkness, its glowing eyes watching quietly. Dalani felt its presence before he saw it. Slowly he lifted his head. Their eyes met again, but this time there was no defiance in Dalani's gaze. Only exhaustion, only truth. Nkoro stepped closer. "You have walked long in silence," its voice echoed. Dalani bowed his head. "I see you now," Nkoro continued, "not as you believed yourself to be, but as you truly are." Dalani closed his eyes. If he could speak, he would have begged. If he could speak, he would have apologized. Instead, he placed his hand over his chest, then lowered it to the ground, a simple, humble gesture. Nkoro watched. The forest held its breath. "Why do you bow?" Nkoro asked. Dalani remained still. Then slowly, he pressed both hands into the earth and lowered his forehead to it. A gesture of surrender, a gesture of respect, a gesture he had once believed was weakness. Nkoro's glowing eyes softened just slightly. "Now you understand," it said. The air around them shifted, no longer heavy, no longer suffocating. "Pride made you deaf," Nkoro continued. "So I took your voice that you might learn to listen." Dalani's body trembled. Tears fell silently into the soil. "You were given a choice," Nkoro said. "You refused it," a pause. "But the world does not only punish, it teaches." Dalani lifted his head slowly. Nkoro stood before him not as a threat, but as something far greater, a force of balance. "You may return," Nkoro said. Dalani's breath caught. "But not as you left." The ground beneath him began to glow faintly. A warmth spread through his chest. His throat tightened. And suddenly, air moved. A sound escaped him. A broken, trembling whisper. "Please." Dalani froze. His voice. It had returned. He looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. Nkoro turned away slightly, already fading into shadow. "Remember this," it said. "The world does not bend to pride. It breaks it until something wiser stands in its place." The forest began to shift again, but this time the path revealed itself. Clear, open, leading home. Dalani struggled to his feet, his body weak, but his heart changed. He took a step forward, then another, and as he walked, he did not look back, because the boy who had entered the forest no longer existed. Only someone new remained, someone who had learned the cost of refusing to listen. They say a child who returns from the forest is not always the same child who entered it. When Dalani finally emerged from the breathing grove, the sun was low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the land. His steps were slow, unsteady, but certain. The forest behind him stood silent once more, as if it had never stirred. But Kandara had changed. The fields, once green and full, had grown weak and dry. The laughter of children had faded. Even the air carried a heaviness, as though the village itself held its breath in waiting. At the edge of the village, Dalani stopped. His eyes filled with tears. This was the cost. He stepped forward. A woman drawing water from a clay pot saw him first. Her eyes widened. "Dalani," she whispered. The pot slipped from her hands, shattering against the ground. Within moments, the village stirred. People rushed from their homes, their voices rising in disbelief. "He has returned." It is the boy. Amara pushed through the crowd, her breath caught in her chest. When she saw him, she froze. For a moment, she did not recognize him, not because his face had changed, but because something deeper had. The fire of defiance was gone. In its place was something quieter, something humbler. "Dalani," she said, her voice breaking. He stepped toward her slowly. "Mother," he whispered. The word came out soft, fragile, like something newly learned. Amara gasped and pulled him into her arms, holding him as though she feared he might disappear again. Kofi stood behind her, his eyes glistening, though his face remained. Dalani nodded, his head lowered. "I thought I knew better," he said. "I thought fear was weakness, and that I was stronger than the warnings." The villagers fell silent, listening. Elder Bako stepped forward, his gaze steady. And now he asked. Dalani lifted his eyes, and for the first time there was no pride in them. "Now I know," he said quietly, "that pride is the true weakness. It blinds you until the world itself must teach you how to see." A murmur moved through the crowd. At that moment, a breeze passed through Kandara. Gentle, warm. The leaves of the baobab tree rustled softly, not with fear but with relief. And slowly, almost as if the land had been waiting for this moment, the change began. The crops, once withering, seemed to lift ever so slightly. The air grew lighter. The heaviness that had gripped the village began to fade. Balance had returned, not because the beast had been defeated, but because the lesson had been learned. In the days that followed, Dalani did not boast of what he had seen. He did not speak of Nkoro with pride. Instead, he listened. He walked beside his father in the fields without complaint. He helped his mother with quiet care. And when the elders spoke, he sat among the children, not above them, and paid attention. Sometimes, when the younger ones grew restless, he would tell them his story, not to frighten them, but to guide them. "The forest is not our enemy," he would say, "but it is not ours to challenge. There are things in this world greater than us, and wisdom is knowing where we stand among them." And so Kandara remembered. They remembered the boy who thought himself fearless. And the young man who returned, understanding that true strength is not in defiance, but in humility. Because they say pride builds a wall around the heart, but humility opens a path back home. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that carry the wisdom of generations.